So when we first met, thank you for giving me your first impression of me, but I'd love to talk about that. But let me start with my first impression of you, and then you can
Please do
talk
so.
about your first impression of me. So we met at a meetup. I think it was the Content Creators
That
meetups,
was the
where
first one,
lots
yeah.
of very creative people come together and share
You
ideas.
were sitting opposite of me. I remember this thing
Yes.
the first time. So
Yeah, but
when I was talking, you were talking in the beginning.
yes.
We were a bit talking to each other.
We were. So initially we came in, I think we had a friendly conversation, probably introduced ourselves to each other. And my first impression of you was he's very young and a super smart guy, like very focused. Sometimes I look at people your age and I'm like, wow, if I had that focus when I was in my 20s, like where would I be like 20 years later? So I was initially very struck by your energy and your focus. So your focus really came over very, very quickly. So I think that was probably my first impression of you. Over to you. What was your first impression of me?
Thank you for the feedback. It means a lot. And the weird thing is, and just to reflect, this is how I see myself as well.
Okay.
So it's good to hear back, obviously, when people see you this
Yeah,
way.
people, you're putting that energy out and people are seeing it.
The first impression of you, for me, was this I told you, this really calm energy. The way you sat down, I remember you were moving really slowly, really deliberately. Everything that you did had this almost like ballet dancer perfectness to it. The way you set down your glass, the way you sat down, the way you introduce yourself. I could obviously hear that you are British, so obviously the stereotypes come in, like there is this posh British guy, but I loved like the way you moved was like either a dancer or a cat, you know? And then you
Interesting.
started to talk. And immediately your voice just soothed me. I loved it. But in a weird way, and this is probably coming from me, this is what I told you, I was impressed by you, but a little intimidated by you. Because I thought that you are judging me. I feel this with a lot of people as well. Maybe it's my insecurity. I'm working on this. That people who I initially set to a really high standard in my mind without talking to a single word to them, I tend to fear that they will judge me and they will see my dark side, you know? But the minute you start to talk, there is this kindness, there is this warmth that comes out of you. And this is why, even though I will read the book as well that you wrote, I really want to listen to your voice as well. It's I don't know if it's weird to not to say it, but I love to hear your voice. I'd love to hear your voice while I'm walking on the beach here in Da Nang when I'm falling asleep, you know?
Yeah.
You have a really soothing voice. I don't know if you trained that. I don't know if you were brought up with that, but it's just the warmth that comes out of your mouth is just amazing.
Wow. Well, thank you for the compliment. There's a couple of things there that I'd love to pick up on. So, as I was writing the book about happiness, which was a book that I've always wanted to write, and really, I wrote it for my 20-year-old self. It was the book that I would love to have read at 20 to provide me with guidance on regulating my emotions, on finding my happiness, on understanding relationships, understanding the importance of connection. So as well as writing the book, which really feels very aligned with my purpose, I also narrated the audiobook because of some really great feedback like yours about the tone of my voice. So thank you for that. But I wonder if, just going back to your earlier point, sometimes when we see people and we have an expectation about what they think of us, it absolutely says much more about how we feel about ourselves than
Absolutely.
those people. And that's why I think first impressions are so interesting in life, right? Because we're often, I think one of the reasons why we rarely remember the name of the other person that we're introduced to when we first meet is because we're thinking about what we want to present and we're thinking about ourselves. And I just think, in terms of really connecting, what I try and do with people when I first meet them, and I hope you felt this, is to really listen and to pay attention. So, I think it's important, particularly in 2026, for people to feel seen and feel listened to. I feel like the types of conversations and the types of interactions I've had with people that I haven't enjoyed as much is when I'm talking to them, but I can see they're distracted. They're looking at their phone, they're looking around the room, they are not focusing on the words that I'm sharing with them. And I think our words are a gift. And what I really felt with you when I first met you was you were really paying attention to the conversation, and you were interesting as well as being interested.
Thank you for saying that, and I feel the same way. Over the years leading up to this point, I've tried to master my presence to really be in the current moment that I'm living in. Maybe you felt the same way, that in this rushing world that we are living now, everyone says to try to capture the present with photos, with everything, with videos, but we don't really live in the present moment. We don't really give ourselves to the emotions we are feeling at this moment. There is this person sitting next to me. The way they move, the energy they bring, the sound of their voice, what is the effect it brings out on in me? And I love what you said about listening first, about the person. I always found in myself that 90% of the time, the first 5 minutes of a conversation with a person really decided the rest of our relationship, in a way that I could roughly tell if this person is the sort of person I want to be around or not. And going back to this content creator meetup, there are many, many people there, and even in the personal growth from many nations, men, women, younger, older, everything. But there are just some people who you are gravitated to. I want to understand that, first of all, as you said, it comes from within, and I think it comes from yourself. Your connection style, your energies are much better matching with other people, or some people. In these groups, in this community now, there are some people like yourself who I'm just gravitated to, who ask me if I want to talk for an hour or so about happiness. I absolutely say yes. But there are some people who I don't connect to as well. Rationally, there would be every opportunity or every reason for me to connect to them. They are intellectual, they come from the same background as me, but for just some reason that spice or that energy is missing. And I've always been a rational person, and I want to ask you about this regarding to happiness. What part I was really rational in my thinking about, this is a good person, this is a bad person, rationally. But these rational decisions usually let me down. And one of the couple of my best relationships or like friendships were the ones which were like didn't really make sense on paper. So what role, in your opinion, does rationality play in our happiness?
Lots of interesting points there. So the first thing I wanted to say is I've come from a place of being quite judgmental of others. And what that really meant was I was incredibly judgmental of myself. So when I let go of judgments about myself, I was able to let go of judgments about others. So I try to approach new potential friendships with an open heart and an open mind. But the early decisions I make about people isn't necessarily coming from my mind. It's coming from my heart and coming from my stomach, And I just think in modern life, we're so in our head, and something I would really like to encourage people to explore is, what are they feeling? Like, what does your gut say? What is your stomach feeling? What's happening in your throat when you're having a conversation with this person? Is there a heat in your chest? What does that mean? So, what I've learned to do through inner observation, and all that really means is just, you know, I absolutely believe there are no bad emotions. There's only moments where I might be disappointed with the way I've reacted because of the emotion, right? But all of my emotions are there to tell me something. They're signposts pointing me towards often more growth. So I generally trust my emotions and my feelings, but that doesn't mean they don't need to be inspected. And I'll give you an example. So, here's a great example actually. In Vietnam, was out with a very good friend of mine and a big group of his friends. I was sat next to one of his friends. Let's just call him the French guy, and we had little bits of conversations, but something throughout the evening told me this isn't the sort of person that I want to spend time with. And the reason for that, when I reflected on it, was I saw the way that they were communicating with other people that they had known for a long time. And I'm a great believer in the way that you see people treat others will be how they treat you in time. So I would rather not give them the time or the opportunity to do that. So I made a couple of observations, tried to do it without judgment. As the evening went on, that person said to me, "Would love to talk to you about happiness. We must meet for a coffee." I smiled, knowing I would never meet them for a coffee. Fast forward a month later, the same friend said, "I'm organizing another dinner. Would love for you to come along." I said, "Oh, is it going to be the same people?" He said, "Yeah, apart from the French guy." And I said, "Oh, why is the French guy going to be there?" He said, "Oh, we had this really weird conversation a week or so ago, and he just got really angry with me for no reason and just blew up, and we haven't spoken since." And I then shared my story with my friend because I would never want to influence my friend on his friendships, but it was just very interesting that I'd noticed something that I didn't feel comfortable
Before he
about
did,
with this
yeah.
friend. And then something happened in this friendship where the French person spoke to him in a way that he wasn't comfortable with. But that for me was a real celebration of trusting how I feel and going with that. So on the flip side of that, I've also come across people who initially bring something up in me. It's like an uncomfortableness, but it's not necessarily because of something they've done which raised a red flag. It's just like a muscle memory in my gut, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling triggered here and I'm not enjoying spending time with them. And I've had a couple of those moments, and I've had to spend time to really figure out what it was, because usually if I'm not comfortable in exploring a friendship with someone, I'll notice the red flag and I'll know what it is. But this was different. But actually, when I sat with it, when I reflected, it was because my best friend at school, who was very loud and very boisterous, and I was overshadowed by before I found my voice, I realized that the people that reminded me of him, I was avoiding and laid alive. So it was like, okay, this isn't a them issue, it's a me issue, and I need to work through that uncomfortableness. But this is all part of a greater, we've got all of these emotions and experiences and muscle memories tucked away in our body, you know, and it just takes certain situations to trigger them. And rather than just thinking, I feel angry because of this interaction, or I don't feel comfortable with this person, and that's it, full stop. I think your happiness comes about when you peel back that layer and you do a bit of internal investigation. Now, some people do that through journaling. Some people do that just through, you know, finding a quiet space, maybe on the beach, maybe in your bedroom, wherever your comfortable and quiet space is, just taking that moment to reflect.
You said amazingly interesting things. These two stories, they both started with you initially having a bad feeling towards the person.
Yeah.
First feeling was right. Second feeling was coming from you, so it was not necessarily right. Based on this, you seem like the type of person to me who takes a bit of time to get to know and to trust the other person, but then if your initial intuition is right, then you trust them more.
Yeah, if you show me who you are, I'll believe you. And I'll believe you the first time. I don't
Uh-huh.
believe in second
You don't
chances,
believe in second chances?
because whenever I've gone through those situations and I haven't trusted my gut based on how I've seen somebody behaving, either towards me or others, 100% of the time I've regretted it. And a lot of those friendships that I created through brokenness and proximity at university or school friends or who lived next door or who my neighbor was, those friendships that you haven't been intentional, I haven't been intentional about, but have fallen into. It's like those types of friendships haven't given me what I need to become the person that I knew I always wanted to be. And I'm a great believer that you are a reflection of the 5 people that you're closest
Oh yeah,
to.
absolutely.
So, why not surround yourself with people who are supportive and who are encouraging and who are aspiring and aspirational? For so long, I surrounded myself with people who, I don't want to call it a toxic friendship because that's not fair. And I also participated in it. And part of growth and happiness is realizing how you participate in the friendships that do not serve you. But in my hometown, before I moved to the big city, I remember feeling trapped and just being around people who lived for the weekend, and we'd all go to the same pub on Saturday. And there was this one get very, very drunk, standing outside, surrounded in clouds of smoke, laughing at the same jokes we laughed at the week before, telling the same stories from school that I know the punchline, but, still feign a laughter at every beat. There was one night, which I talk about in the book, and I looked up at the clear night sky and the clarity really hit me. And it was, if I stay here, in 10 years' time, I'm going to be having these same conversations with these same people. Now, this isn't a diss to the people that are living those lives, but what was important for me is making decisions that serve my happiness, and I think part of happiness is figuring out what it means for you and then taking action. Because for too long, I was staying still. It hurt and I just complained about it, and that didn't serve me and it didn't serve my happiness.
You said a really interesting thing about these five people you surround yourself with. This is something I know rationally that it's really beneficial for you. This was something I was really struggling with as a young child. When I was brought up in my hometown, I had the same group of guys, mostly guys, like 10 of us. I left this group 4 or 5 years ago. Not officially, you obviously don't sign a letter and you don't send it to them. It's just
checking out of this
you
friendship.
just kind of disappear. Like they invite you once or twice, you don't really go, you don't spend New Year's with them, and they soon start to realize that you are not part of the group anymore. I don't believe there is any other way to do this. Still to this day, they get together. Still to this day, they do the same things. Get together on Friday night, get drunk, and I used to join them once or twice a year, as you said, same kind of jokes. Then I realized what I know now, and what you said as well, surround yourself people who inspire you. But there is this lonely chapter in your life. I'm sure you experienced this, is that you've left your past identity. You are not that anymore. You are not a part of this group anymore, but your new identity is not formed yet enough to find people to have by your side now. My question to you is, knowing rationally there are these 5 people who really influence you. Obviously, this is a two-sided relationship, so it's not just okay to say that, yeah, Jason, I want you to be my number 3 in my group of 5. This obviously has to come from both sides. How do you form and how do you maintain these relationships? Because I had the sense for a lot of time that there were these people in my life who I was really looking up to and really inspired by, but they wouldn't be friends with me because in a weird way, I'm not at their level yet. So how do you get this ball rolling?
I think the point that you've just made there is an interesting point, but I wonder if that is your self-judgment rather
Absolutely,
than
100%. And let me just interrupt. Absolutely. And this
okay,
is what I know about myself. When you said that you are really judgmental about yourself, I do this as well. I'm consciously now working on to love myself more.
amazing.
I'm now saying told you this La Sagrada Familia, or I told the La Sagrada Familia example, not being perfect. And also, I've decided now that I'm dating myself and not anyone, not random girls here in Danang. I'm dating only myself. I'm loyal to myself. So yeah, this is
Yeah,
my reflection on
I love
myself.
that. I think my biggest challenge in my 20s, when I was really going through this transformation and starting my happiness journey, and here I am 20 years later, and a lot of those experiences now in the book. But what was my biggest challenge was opening my heart, because I come from a family in a small town who taught me that the world is a dangerous place and you've gotta don't tell anybody anything about you. It's like keep your business to yourself. Don't share things about your family or yourself. You know, people are out there to hurt you. And actually, when I realized that the opposite is true and the world is filled with amazing people with beautiful hearts who want to connect, I was then able to make those connections. So it really wasn't about anybody else, it was about me. And that's why I really enjoy our conversations, because it's like I feel like I was you, and so many of the things that you're experiencing I experienced, and I don't think I'll ever stop being that person, but and I don't want to, because this is all part of the beauty of growth, right? You know, the more I travel, the more I learn about the world that we live in, and the more I learn about myself. I'm still learning about myself every day, and that's what makes life so interesting. So, you know, a lot of those areas around self-judgment, about wanting to protect myself but making a different choice, is something I'm evolving with and growing every day. And it was by really dismantling my armor and opening my heart and being more trusting that I connected with the people who I now consider my best friends, who fill my heart with joy every time we're together.
What practices do you do, or what mindset do you possess so you can love yourself so much and you can accept yourself?
Not allowing my ego or inner critic to take the wheel. And every time they show up, question it, because we end up allowing our inner critic to talk to us in a way that we would never speak to somebody that we loved and cared about. That somehow we get into a rhythm of just allowing this negative voice to continue to drum away in the background, and it's almost like drops of water eroding stone. You know, we're made of really strong stuff, but if we allow the water to keep on dripping and we don't turn off that tap, it takes away from the person that we know that we can be. So part of my growth, an important part of it, was introducing my inner critic to my inner coach. So every time my inner critic shows up, I question them. And I say, that is a view, but here's another way of looking at it. And this is why that's not quite true. Because what I found with my inner critic is it's not just enough to say, no, you're not right. My inner critic needs evidence, right? Because my inner critic is super smart. So if I can show up with evidence, and it happened actually this week. So I was moving into a new apartment. I'd made a miscalculation on how much money I needed to bring for the apartment. It was a really silly mistake. On my way to the apartment, which meant I had to be late to meet the landlord, and it was an inconvenience, I caught myself saying, Jason, you're so stupid. And as soon as I caught myself saying that, I took a breath, I paused, and I said, Jason, you're not stupid, and it's not fair to say that. In fact, you've designed a life that you really love, and you're great at the big picture, but sometimes you don't pay enough attention to the little detail. And that's okay, and it's something you can work on. And that for me is an example of creating happiness. It's a small step towards happiness, but the small steps add up to like a giant leap, right? But it's these little moments that I catch myself throughout the day and I reinforce the person I am.
I really liked in this story that at the moment where you caught yourself in the act of talking bad about yourself, you immediately turned it to the flip side, saw the positive, and you took the time into essence. Like you said, you've designed this life for yourself. So this is a way of saying that where were you a couple of years ago, and look at you, where you are at now. You are in this privileged position of renting a new apartment here in paradise in Da Nang, and like how great is this? I really work on this to do the same. My biggest insecurity in my life is my body. I told you I was really fat for a lot of years. Then I lost the weight, which was good. But a thing that no one told me about when losing such a big weight, in such a short time, because I did it in like 2 years, you will have a lot of loose skin on your body. And like these stretches, you know? I still do that. There has never been a time in my life where I took off my shirt and I was absolutely pleased with the way I look. It's getting better now. I'm going to the gym, I'm looking after how I eat, I use all this lotion to make my body and my skin more tight, and it's getting better, but I don't remember a feeling where I was completely satisfied myself. I'm trying to consciously, and this is what I do consciously, like just look at yourself right now, look at yourself 5 years ago. Like you could be in the same position today that you were 5 years ago. You are not. How great is that? But still, deep inside, I know all this rationally, but deep inside, I always have this huge level of insecurity because of the way I look. And I've gotten so many like good feedback on how I look from girls and guys alike. Still, for some reason, my mind is refusing to accept it. So how do you think someone can overcome that, or how can I overcome this state in my life?
I believe that we are all driven by patterns. Patterns are the motors behind our life. And when we change our patterns, we change our life. So I think you've probably got a pattern of thinking and behaving that some of it might be conscious, some of it subconscious, just kind of happening in the background. I often think about it, my inner voice being the song when you're in a cafe. It's kind of in the background and you're working away. But if you're not focused on what you're doing, you could be distracted by the song and you start singing along and you start believing the words. Through the work of like reflection and really understanding who you are and what you want to be, I think you get to choose the song that plays in the background and you get to set the volume, right? So perhaps your pattern is, and I don't know you well enough to understand your pattern, but perhaps your pattern is, okay, every time I go to the beach to do X, I feel this. And then it's like, okay, so that's my pattern. So now how do I interrupt that pattern and how do I incorporate reward, right? Because to change patterns, the easiest way to hack our system is to place reward in there. So it's like, without even thinking about it, you go, your body, your mind, your nervous system starts going, oh, I've done this thing. I was rewarded. I want to do it again. So I'm going to look forward to doing it again. So if you and I were working together longer, I would probably want to understand exactly where those moments are showing up and how you can incorporate reward. So part of that is understanding what reward looks like to you, for example. So I'll give you an example for me. So I've had moments in when I was in the UK, living in a big city, 8 million people, but feeling incredibly lonely and like I wanted to be somewhere else. And what I had to do was to change my pattern, because particularly over the winter months, it's dark when you go to work, it's dark when you come back, it's so cold and wet, you just don't want to do anything. So part of my changing my pattern was getting up in the morning, and whatever morning light there is, getting the morning light, experiencing that morning light, right? So it's like, okay, so here's the good behavior. I'm going to get up an hour earlier. I'm going to go for a walk regardless of the weather, because 100% of the time when I do that, I feel better. But often when I get out of bed, I open the curtains, it's like, ugh, another horrible day, right? So it's like, okay, this is the behavior that I want to incorporate. Now, where's the reward? So I love an extra hot flat white. So then my reward is, okay, my favorite coffee shop is 20-minute walk away. Why don't I incorporate my extra hot flat white at the cafe? And it's like, by taking those small steps and interrupting the patterns, we're able to step towards happiness. But the first step is being aware of your pattern. Like, what is it that's keeping us in a place of unhappiness?
I love what you said about the flat white. This is a great story. This is a bit more into the Atomic Habits, James Clear territory of rewarding yourself. A big reward for me for starting to go to the gym was drinking an amazing protein shake afterwards, which is really like tasty and sweet, and going to the sauna. I'm a huge sauna fan, so I make sure to go to the sauna every time. After going to the gym, I specifically choose a gym every time that has a sauna. I really like this reward system that you are saying, and in this way you are connecting in your brain something that is hard, something that is uncomfortable but good for you in the long term, with something kind of an instant gratification, but not a sort of instant gratification that will be so bad. So let's just say you want to walk more, you want to hit 10,000 steps. You can say after the 10,000 steps that I reward myself to buy a Snickers at the store and just eat this bar of chocolate. It's not the end of the world, because still the reward, as you say, still the positive impact of what you are doing to your body is still higher. What I'm really interested in is that you are not the first person telling me about these like tools, hacks, or things at your disposal to kind of, I wouldn't say artificially, but purposely make yourself happier. So these things in your glove box that you can reach for to make yourself happier, but in a positive way. You mentioned walking. What else do you do that when you feel down or when you are sad, you immediately can bring yourself out of this?
So part of understanding myself and my pattern is knowing that when I'm falling into a slump, because I don't always spot it on the first day, my pattern is to reach for something sweet. So it's to reach for a brownie or a cookie. And I absolutely believe that part of my happiness is having a varied diet and having the freedom to eat what I want. But let's understand how my body feels when I eat it and make the right choices. But part of my pattern when I'm unhappy about something, it might be a relationship, it might be about me not achieving my goals, is I'll be enjoying brownies every day rather than once a week. And what I've learned is I have to interrupt the pattern when I see myself reaching for something sweet every day. So what that creates for me is an opportunity to look inward and say, okay, why do I need this quick fix rather than by the backache. Why do I need this quick fix rather than working on what's really going on for me? So the reaching for the thing which gives me a moment of pleasure, if it's happening frequently, is my opportunity to go inwards and go, okay, let's go and find a quiet place and find out what's really going on. But when that happens and I've done the work to figure out what I'm unhappy about and then create a bit of a mini action plan. So recently it was, I'm not really happy with the way that a friend of mine is behaving towards me, and I need to be clear about what my boundary is in this area, and I need to communicate that to them, right? But often what happens for me is before I've had that thought and been very clear about what I'm unhappy about, it just festers and shows up in our relationship. So maybe, I'm a bit rude to him when we're out having dinner together or having a coffee together, and he might feel like something's off, but I just haven't told him what I want, what our aspirations are from our relationship, and I haven't participated healthily. So often that manifests in an unhealthy way for me, where I damage my health by eating, consuming things which aren't good for me. So recognizing that pattern is an important part of my happiness. But once I recognize what is wrong, and then I put a plan in place to address it, I then don't feel the need to reach for the cookie.
It's so interesting. You've told now many stories that show to me that you are at a really high level of consciousness. You mentioned the story with the two guys or the two friends, where the second time you realized that it's not them that's making you feel like this, it was your childhood, school trauma with your friend who overshadowed you. Then you are going to the apartment with the money, and then you catch yourself in the act of talking bad about yourself, and you are conscious. When you are reaching for the cookie, you say that, okay, let's step back and sit down. Like, this requires, in my mind, such a high level of consciousness and being aware of your emotions 24/7.
Yeah.
How did you get to this state?
Well, I've got a whole chapter about that in the book called Self-Mastery, and it's very early on in the book, because I think without self-mastery, we're not able to achieve all of these other elements of happiness, because happiness starts with us, right? And understanding what makes us happy, but perhaps more importantly, what makes us unhappy, and then creating a bit of a happiness project. A bit of a plan. We're great at showing up at our jobs and delivering for our boss. Well, I took the opportunity to show up for myself and deliver for myself. And that meant just being very intentional about understanding how I'm feeling throughout the day, and sometimes when I speak to people, they think, or they say, wow, that must take a lot of work and energy. I'm like, dude, take an hour away from social media every day and just think about yourself and think about what you want to achieve and feel your body and feel your emotions and start understanding you so that you can create a plan from where you are to where you need to be. Now, that sounds really simple in explaining it, but of course, that took me 10 years at least to get to a point where I was really understanding this and really at a place where I could put these elements into a happiness project and create more happiness for myself. But it comes from just observing, and it's a little bit scary, and it does take a lot of effort, because it's like, we've lived with these emotions for 10, 20, 30 years, and we've never really questioned them, right? Maybe we've just drunk them away, or we've eaten them away, or we've scrolled them away. But that is just a minor distraction, right? It's just distracting you from looking in the mirror, and now's the time to look in the mirror.
Really interesting. What I feel is a lot of people are afraid to do that, as you mentioned, afraid to look deeper. And I had this quote, I heard it from a friend of mine, that we are living in the age of the Walking Dead, that everyone is distracted all the time, and this is not allowing them, as you say, to look inward, look deeper and understand the deeper meanings of their existence, which will result in them letting go of the past traumas and living a life true to themselves. I think this world that we live in now is doing anything but to make us conscious, make us aware. I don't try to be like a conspiracy theorist to say that it's conscious and it's a design plan by some secret society. I don't say that. It's just I feel that in today's world, what sells is if you don't think, you just buy. It's much better. And I've mentioned this in another conversation that our whole world is basically motivated by growth, constant growth. Have you read Sapiens by Harari?
Yes.
Then you know that
Bits of. Actually, I found it quite difficult to read.
It's really difficult to read.
Definitely, I find him interesting, and I've learnt about myself that the best way for me to learn is to listen. So I've listened to a lot of his podcasts and his interviews. I find him fascinating. But yeah, reading the book, I found a bit of a challenge. But there was certainly some interesting ideas in there.
It was a life-changing book for me. This is why I asked you if you read it. And in the book, he mentions that in the past ages, people were not really sure about the future. Mm-hmm. They were living in the present in a sense that they moved from place to place, these tribes, they lived up the crops, they collected the fruits, they hunted the animals, and they moved on. The day the world shifted is where we could do things now that would predict our wellness in the future. Mm-hmm. So plant the seeds, feed the animals, and then as the money started, bank system started, the biggest thing according to the author was loans. And I give you money now because I have trust in you that this money will make even more money. So now we've established this monetary idea that the future will be even more, even bigger, even better than now. But in order to keep up this, as the author says, myth, there needs to be this constant growth in the world. And this constant growth needs to be supported by people working, producing the GDP, you going into work 9 to 5, doing your job, and every person bringing a bit more into the common than they are taking out. In a world, I think, what is dominated by growth, more, you see all these Fortune 500 companies. If they stay on the same level profit-wise as last year, it's considered a failure. You never see a forecast, or you never see a goal setting. You work for big companies, right? Like, you never see that the company says that we will only make as much money next year as we did this year. There is always needs to be more and more and more. And in this economy, I think, and in this world that we live in right now, constant growth is required. And this can only be done if, I think, people don't think, people just do, produce. Because if everyone thought of like us, everyone left their Western homes and Western cultures and the corporate world in Western Europe, then the world would not go on as it is. The world is moved and motivated by the 80-90% of the people who work from 9 to 5. And I think the minute people start to question themselves, they tend to jump out of the matrix. How do you say this? How do you see this?
To find the truth, follow the money. So we live in a capitalistic system, and I don't think capitalism is the problem, because I would rather be in a capitalistic system than a communistic system. But I think the opportunity is through our choices. And there is steps that we can take to be more intentional about our choices, right? So rather than being taken, being driven, having somebody else make decisions about your life, when you become the driver of your life and you take advantage of the opportunities and the system that we live in. So the problem with the rat race is, even if you win, you're still a rat, right? Mm. And what I did I worked in corporate for 20 years. And by understanding the system, I was then able to make it work for me and make different choices. Now, you're right in that capitalism is not set up in a way that everybody can be an entrepreneur, but it creates our education system where, certainly in the UK, we're not taught about finances and how to manage money and what credit card interest is and what is a good deal on a mortgage and how to create wealth to a point where you no longer rely on the system, because capitalism is created in such a way that it is creating consumers by and large. So it wants people to consume. And social media is a part of that, right? So social media is optimized based on engagement. And often that engagement is outrage or it's shame or it's anger. And that's what we're responding to. And that's what we get more of. Now, wouldn't it be a beautiful world if social media was optimized on happiness? So it could absolutely do that.
I love that.
And it's like, but it's not, because it's optimized based on what you are engaging with. And, you know, it's not just engagements by clicks. It's when you're hovering on social media that it gets all of these indicators that this is the type of content that you want more of. I have a very good friend of mine who's incredibly smart, but she just doesn't spend a lot of time on social media. But when she does, she's like, are you getting lots of things about immigration in your feed? And I said, no. She's like, oh, I am. And I'm really angry about it. I can't believe that, you know, all of these things are happening. I'm like, dude, you've got to be intentional about how you use social media. So I choose to use social media to engage with things that inspire and uplift me. So I get more inspiration and feel uplifted when I'm tuning into social media because I'm intentional about it. But I also understand that this thing hasn't been created to serve my happiness. I've been created to serve my happiness.
I love that. You mentioned that you are engaging with positive content on social media. I'm not on social media anymore. Maybe I mentioned this to you that I quit 3 years ago. So I know it's not the most balanced way to do it. I believe that every addiction, because let's face it, social media is an addiction. Every addiction needs to be balanced, and you can really control it if you let it into your life, but you are in control. I've chosen with this not to do it at all. But whenever I did, I also try to focus on positive content, self-help content. I don't know, the new pandas are being born in the zoo where I live. It's like such a positive, uplifting thing, or babies or dogs or something. Is there a thing, in your opinion, as toxic happiness? Because I've had this conversation with my friend a couple of times ago, and he said that if you just only focus on the positive, then this will lead to you being this fake, always happy person who is not intact with the dark side of the world, as we can say.
Yeah, toxic happiness is an interesting thing. I always feel a bit triggered with the word toxic because it makes me think of toxic masculinity, which I think is entirely unhelpful in the world and is created to divide us rather than bring us together. But perhaps that's a separate point. But yeah, I think there's a type of happiness that's unhelpful, and it's where you're pretending to be happy, even though that you're not. I don't think that's I don't think that's helpful for you or the people around you. I think the opportunity is to understand that there are no bad emotions, right? So if you're feeling something and it might be an emotion that doesn't bring you happiness, the opportunity is to explore the emotion rather than just put a plaster over it and think, oh, it's kind of there festering away beneath the plaster. But if I put this pretty plaster over it with a nice smiley face, on it, it's going to make me feel better. I don't believe that's true. I think your opportunity in that situation is to explore what's really going on. And in the book, I talk about the 6 seeds of happiness. Usually it's one of those 6 areas that needs more cultivation from you to really get you back to a place of happiness. And your opportunity is to take some time for yourself, be compassionate, and explore.
6 seeds of happiness. I was entertaining some idea as well on how to artificial a pyramid of happiness. I started writing about it. It's probably gonna be an ebook sometime. So
amazing! I'll definitely read it.
Thank you. I don't know in which form will I put it out. Maybe it's gonna be only like freebie, or I will charge some money about it.
Okay.
I've designed this ebook, and I'm now spoiling it. That it's a scavenger hunt basically for infinity stones, and each infinity stones represents a part of your happiness or something, and it's getting harder by level. It's a bit of like video game Avengers, since I'm mostly targeting young men.
Yeah.
What I found
Are
is
you
that
Thanos or Stark in this story?
yeah. Actually, that's a weird thing that you say. Thanos is the bad guy, right? But he had really interesting ideas on happiness, everything in balance. And yeah, he killed half of the population, but the motive behind it was actually noble, to save the planet. So
The greater good.
extreme again, but I love these heroes or these anti-heroes or villains who are not just black and white. So you can see these characters who are just good in every sense or bad in every sense. I really like the gray characters. Another one, gray area I love about Thanos is he still has compassion towards his daughters. So I really like this character. Maybe this is what inspired me to do this Infinity Stones. And I found while writing this, and I wanted to give advice about this as well, how to use these tools at your disposal, that 90% of the time, when I'm unhappy or I'm sad, I don't feel motivated, I ask myself three questions. Did I sleep well? Did I eat well? Did I move my body? And 90% of the time, if no is the answer to one of the three questions, this is the reason why I feel unhappy. Obviously, there are more parts to it.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting more into as I'm journaling, getting more into the purpose side of things. I really believe that we are put on this earth to, first of all, to learn, then to teach, and then to create something new. So you are taking something, you are giving it to something, and you're bringing something new to life. So I believe that is, in my mind, aligning with our purpose. But still, 90% of my unhappiness is solved by mastering sleep, food, and exercise. How do you feel about this?
I love that. I think we all need to start our happiness journey from where we are. So if you're at a place where your diet isn't where it should be, that's an amazing place to start, because I think also in 2026, in modern life, there are so many choices and there are so many things that we could do that it can feel overwhelming. But if you haven't started with your physical health and your sleep, then that's a foundation that is a great place to start from. And I love the way that you described it as like a Maslow hierarchy, because it's like, yes, take care of your basic needs first so that you can then springboard into self-actualization, really focusing on your purpose, really understanding the person that you energetically want to be in the world. But it's very difficult to do any of those things if you're not sleeping and you haven't got a balanced diet.
Sure. Because the things that you are talking about, this higher level of consciousness, sitting back, thinking about your deeper meanings and deeper ideas, this requires, I think, a higher existence in a way that if the basis is not right, you cannot achieve this. Obviously, this is a part of the equation, but what I found with going deeper is there are some times where I'm really inclined to do this. There are some times where I'm really rejecting to do this. I'm still not at that level that you are of being conscious all the time. How do you design your life in a way to support this deeper living and deeper level of existence?
So I developed a formula for happiness, which is positivity plus practice.
Positivity plus practice.
Positivity plus practice times intention equals happiness. So it's like you need to show up positively for yourself and the world. You need to be intentional about what do you want to achieve. So, once you've understood your patterns and you want to take action towards shifting the pattern, let's be intentional about that. There's a plan that needs to be put in place, and then practice. It's like going to the gym. If you want a six-pack, You're not going to get it by watching Netflix every day and scrolling on Instagram whilst eating pizzas. There's no judgment against that. But if your goal is to get a six pack, that's not the route, right? So if you want to create more happiness, happiness is motion. You've got to be intentional and you've got to be clear and you've got to practice. Now, there are days where I might not be feeling my happiness and there is an action that I want to take about it because I just haven't got the energy. I'm taking a day off. That's okay. But my book is about giving people the tools so that when they're ready to get back on their happiness journey, they can do it.
So practicing happiness daily is the same form as practicing anything, exercise, or probably the way you wrote your book is not that you sat down once and you wrote the whole thing in one sitting, small iterations. I remember you mentioning something in the meetup that you wrote like 3 hours every day for a year.
Yeah, so it was more of an organic process. It was great conversations that I was having with people like you about the subject of happiness that I was making notes about in my notes app on my phone. And over time, I thought, wow, I've got something here which would be really valuable to share for others. So I wrote the book like a conversation between two people, like we're doing right now. And it's designed in the way where the reader feels like they're learning from these universal experiences that I'm sharing. So about friendship, about self-mastery, about kindness, about boundaries. And they're reflecting on their life and how these areas might be contributing or taking away from their happiness. But I had to be dedicated in terms of creating a couple of hours each day to sit down and go, okay, now I'm just gonna write. But I'd never written a book before, and it's not, I didn't follow any rules. I just wrote it in a way that would be a book that I would love to read.
I would love to read. This conversational style is really similar in my mind to what Eckhart Tolle did in The Power of Now. Have you read this book?
Yes.
So what he did basically is he collected questions that came up during his audience participations or his shows or his lectures.
Yeah.
And he basically answered them. And then in this sense, you have this feeling, or when someone reads your book, that they are talking to you. How do you... So I see now that there are a lot of self-help gurus. I've never been drawn to the people who are like these really like showing the finger and you should do this and like 5 steps to make $100 million and stuff like that. I much more prefer the people who are like showing by telling, showing an example. We could use the I word as well, I word influencer, which is now has a bit of a bad term, I think. But how do you balance the fact of not being this you should do this person, but also giving some practical advice?
Well, my personal style in conversation is much more about getting to know the other person and sharing my experience where I can and offering suggestions. So naturally, that is my conversational style. So it was really easy to write in that way. And the types of books that I've read on happiness that I haven't enjoyed have been where they've talked about very dry scientific terms around happiness, and it just felt so unapproachable and so difficult to apply. But I also haven't enjoyed books that have been so focused on telling and giving you specific instructions, because I'm a great believer that we need to figure it out for ourselves. And the most interesting conversations for me are where I have no need to be right, you have no need to be right, but let's explore this together. Let's see how you feel. Let's see if this resonates with you. And that's really how I shaped the book.
Maybe this is why you named the 6 seeds, right? 6 seed, the seed I'm planting in you, and the idea will unfold itself in you like a plant.
That's interesting. So I'd never really thought about it as me planting the seed in them. I'd thought about it as the reader understanding the importance of these seeds and really planting and cultivating them in their own garden of peace and being intentional about what they wanted each seed to achieve. And, you know, like we say, there's some days where you haven't got the patience to go into your garden of peace and water every seed, but maybe there's a little bit today that you can do about being kinder to yourself. Maybe there's a little bit you can do today around setting your boundaries. You know, there are small steps that you can take towards happiness. And I don't think happiness is any one thing. And I certainly don't think it's the same for every single person. But I think we live in a world that is so focused on putting our attention out there externally and not about focusing inwards. You know, my parents couldn't teach me about emotional regulation because they can't emotionally regulate themselves. You know, I never learned about happiness at school because I was learned to be on time. I was taught to be on time and to, you know, learn about these mathematical equations that I'll never use again in life. It's like all of this stuff I wasn't taught, i.e. these really important components of happiness. And that's why I wanted to create more conversations about how we can individually tap into our own happiness and help support the happiness of others.
I love the idea that you have this garden of happiness and where you're planting these seeds. And I always try to tell people when I'm making my videos, I'm giving advice in real life. Someone asked me like, how did you lose all this weight? And I don't think that there is a blueprint for any sort of transformation. There is a way for you that you can do it and you can apply it to your life. I always tell to people, just try. Don't try it once. Give yourself an extended period of time where you try this new habit, this new mindset, anything in your life. And then really important, as you said, reflect on it. How did I feel? The habits I have in my life right now that are making me really happy. Meditation, journaling, going to the gym, sometimes just ringing a friend out of the nowhere just to hear how they are, playing guitar. These all started with me just trying it out once and see if I like it. But there have been a lot of things that I tried, did not really work for me because it was not meant to be. Just today, I've started doing the Wim Hof breathwork for the first time and I felt amazing. And I know that this is going to be something in my life that I'm going to be doing on a regular basis. But there have been some things I've been experimenting with. For example, I tried to go vegan twice in my life for 1 month each. So when I came here to Da Nang for the first time, I was like, let's try going vegan. And it's not that I refuse to believe either side, like the meat eaters or the vegans. Rationally, I was like, okay, I will just see how my body reacts. And I did not like being vegan. I believe, as you said, that a balanced diet is the best, where you can eat whenever you want. I could feel that it's restraining and pulling back my life. So I love what you say about not pointing the finger and telling people the blueprint. However, maybe for some people who are really in the beginning of the journey, they need this push. And if we talk about men in particular, I believe, so when I started to make my content, I showed it to a friend of mine, a guy. He said, it's great. I love these like action steps. I love it. It's pragmatic. I love like 10 things that I can remember, I can write down. And then I showed it to my sister. My sister was like, it's not really for me. I'm like, why? I don't really like to tell people tell me what to do. So I think it's work for some people, but not for others. Maybe your book will really resonate with some people. This approach that you are taking really resonates with me, that you are giving me the freedom to come up with my own form of happiness. Maybe people will hate it because they will say that this Jason is just going on and on about his stories and his conversations. I bought this book because I want to start today. I want to be happy tomorrow. What do you say to those people who want quick results, quick happiness in 10 actionable steps?
Couple of things. So one of them is I didn't write the book for everybody. I wrote the book for anyone who would enjoy this type of conversation. So the book is designed to be the loving, supportive friend that they may or may not have in their life. But it's not the type of friend that is top down, like I'm the teacher, you're the student, and this is exactly what you should do. It's a much more explorative, right? But having said that, I do have a whole chapter in the book about practice because practice is an important part of the happiness formula. And within that, there is it's a 10-day guide to creating more happiness for yourself. So, it's not a you must do this. It's if you're open to creating more happiness, here are things that you can do over the next 10 days to improve your happiness. So people can either choose to do that or skip it and then move to the next section. But that is there for those people who need something that is more structured and perhaps less reflective, because it is an exact to-do guide by day, but it's not a prerequisite. I think, for those people who need a drill master and, you need to feel like it is being in the army for a week, my book's probably not going to be right for you if you need that. But also part of the reason why I wrote the book is because I know there are people who are out there who need to reflect and explore, but to do it in a way that they're comfortable with. Because I also believe that if you try and move too quickly around, mastering and understand your emotions, you can create more trauma and more unhappiness, because it's like, I've got this emotion and it's to do with my relationship with my dad. And here's one thing I need to do to overcome that. Life isn't that easy, unfortunately. Or perhaps fortunately, right? Because the opportunity is to reflect and explore and then think about how you might want to rebalance that relationship. And that is going to come with time and it's going to come with practice. It's not like a light switch you turn on today and then from tomorrow everything changes. If you're in your 20s, you've probably had these patterns for as long as you've been alive. So trying to change it overnight could create more of a negative impact on your happiness than a positive. And I'd like to take you on a positive happiness journey.
Because it can create this friction, this expectation of, I want this now, I want this today.
Yeah.
I especially believe, I love what you said about time, and time being a huge component in this, and being patient with yourself. I think over the generations, we've become more impatient. My generation is the generation of instant gratification, and even the generations before me or the after me were even younger or even worse than that. We were socialized to get the thing that we want right now. I mean, if I picked up my phone right now, open the Grab application, we could get any food delivered to here right now in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Whereas, Hungary was under Soviet occupation for 50 years. My parents always tell me the story. My dear son, it was not like when you wanted the car that you went online, you designed the color and everything, and you ordered it, and in a week it was at the dealership where you could walk in right now and get a car right away. There was this company called Merkur. They had to wait 5 years for a car. There was one type of car, 2-3 colors. Maybe you ordered a red one, and they called you 5 years later that, hello, mister, or Jason, you can come in to get your car, but I have to let you know it's not red, it's blue. Is it okay? And you waited 5 years for it. When they wanted banana, for example, that was like a really special thing at that time. Banana came once a month, and it was all over the news. It was a big thing that, okay, you can come to the store right now and get the banana, but they would get it in 1 month. Patience was something in my whole life that I was not good at. I always wanted quick results, fast results. But then I started to realize, as you're saying, that the patterns and the habits I have now, they've been formed over many years. I like to see people as the, as you said, as the sum of directions. And I always say this, that you are not like this. You became like this over the years. But if you became someone, you can become someone else. But it requires time, patience, and as you said, practice, practicing the mindset. What I started to do now, maybe this is a bit artificially designed stuff. I pictured in my mind the sort of person I want to be. And not just like what kind of car do I want to have and where do I want to live, not like that. If I were to sit with myself, my future self in 10 years, 20 years, like I'm sitting with you right now, what sort of person do I want to spend time with? And I aspire every day to have those traits. And whenever I think rashly or I want to do something impromptu, I want to get the things now, I ask myself the question, how would 40-year-old Mate do this thing? How would he talk about this thing? So how will the 60, 70-year-old Jason will be? What will he think about your current self, and how will you be when you are 70?
Before I answer that, I think that's a really good point, and also sums up my formula for happiness perfectly, right? It's about being positive about what you want to achieve and knowing that you can do it. It's about being intentional. Okay, so what sort of person do I want to be and what steps do I need to take towards it, and then practice. So that sums up the formula for happiness perfectly. So thank you for sharing that story. But it also made me think of, you were talking about your weight, and although to everybody else you're in great shape, but in your head you're still that overweight kid. I like to think about situations like that as your 70, 80, 90-year-old self who will look back at the person you are today and think, why did I spend so much time beating myself up when I was in great health? I had great energy. I had these great opportunities. I was doing what I loved. And in that moment, I couldn't enjoy it for what it was because my pattern had me trapped in the past.
I love that.
But to answer your question about me, I am really proud of the development that I've made. If I think back to the person I was in my 20s, compassionately and without judgment, I try. I was just working it out. I hadn't figured out who I was, and I don't look back at that moment and feel sadness. I look back and I feel proud about the steps that I've taken to become the person I am today. So at every decade of my life, I hope I continue to feel proud about the man I'm becoming.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.